Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Beautiful thing about being virtual is we're all in different time zones. But hello and welcome to today's session, Engaging with Constituents via Unauthenticated Communities. My name is Haley McNitt, and I'm with Form Assembly, one of today's sponsors. Form Assembly is a web form and data collection platform who works with many nonprofits throughout the world. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Michael Grandel, who is the Director of Business Intelligence at National Aquarium, a principal and consultant at Lot 48 Consulting, a co-leader of the Baltimore Administrators Group, Destination Success 2017 World Champion Administrator, and a Lightning Champion. On top of that, Michael is 11 times Salesforce certified. You got some cool qualifications there, Michael. Just so you know, a recorded version of this webinar will be available to all attendees after the event, along with all other sessions. On top of that, we want to let you know a little bit about how the chat will work. We'd love to hear from you during the session if you have any questions. It'll be monitored by moderators. So if you have a question for Michael or about the event itself, please don't hesitate to chat in. With that being said, I want to make sure that I can hand it over to Michael. So go ahead, Michael, whenever you're ready to go.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. As Haley said, I'm from the National Aquarium in Baltimore. So what I'm going to talk about is an application that we built to reopen during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll talk through the use case and then some of the Salesforce features that we used. Thank you to all of our sponsors for nonprofit Dreamin. Appreciate that. Here's a real high level. We're going to go through. I'm going to talk about the reservations, then show you the data model, some of the flows and community features that we used, give you some lessons learned, and then because of the success of the reservations application, with schools closed, we decided to build an education experiences portal that works very similarly, but it's a little more complex use case. And then we'll take some questions. But feel free to send questions along the way. They're being monitored, and if anyone has anything that's pressing, they'll interject and they'll ask them for me so we can stop and address the questions. So the need for reservations. Okay, so the National Aquarium does a lot of things. We do a lot of animal rescue around the world and conservation and area cleanups. But for this, we're specifically talking about the aquarium, the museum proper. So we have about 20,000 animals on premise, and we have over 1 million visitors a year during a regular year come visit us. And like everyone, we closed down for a while during the beginning of the pandemic. And when we went to open, we knew we needed to do things a little bit differently. So we've always had timed entry for guests for general admission, but members and other constituents, one of the benefits of those programs a lot of times is they can just arrive whenever they want to arrive. Because we have to manage social distancing and stay in compliance with all the state and local regulations, we needed to ask people to make a reservation before they came. So on our business needs side, we needed to allow members to validate their membership and create a reservation that stays within the membership benefits. So the membership has expiration dates, it has levels, so there could be different number of guests that they could bring, et cetera. We're going to focus on the members side here, but we do have some other programs as well, such as a local library benefit where school kids can read books and earn some admission. So we have some other entry types as well. We needed to enforce the capacity limits in real time, and we needed to allow our guest services folk to validate that it was a valid reservation at the door without really slowing down the lines. We've already added temperature checks and sort of other screenings to make so that it already takes a little longer to get into the building. So we wanted to keep people flowing, not only for a customer service point of view, but also from a safety point of view. We don't want people to bunch up as they're getting in. So on the platform side, we knew we needed to build it rapidly. I mean, if you think back to, the late spring, early summer, we weren't sure exactly how things were going to be. We knew information would be changing. So we wanted to build this. We went from idea to launch in about 3 weeks. We knew we needed to be able to manage multiple capacities and different entry times. So not every entry time is going to have the same capacity limits. And we knew a lot of things were potentially going to change rapidly. So we needed to be able to build those pivot points into the application. So which programs we're making reservations for, which dates and time slots are eligible, the entry times, and the capacity limits. So on the Salesforce side of things, here's a simple version of the data model. So we already had accounts that had the members' expiration dates and their membership number and all that sort of stuff that's already living on the account information. So we went ahead, we made a couple of custom objects. We made a dates object so we could basically daisy chain underneath of it all the time slots. So each day has a number of time slots underneath of it so that we can add or remove time slots as necessary. And ultimately, what the guest is trying to make is this reservation record, which is a junction between the time slot they've chosen and the account that holds their membership information. And then that tells us, what day they're coming, how many are in their party, all that sort of stuff, the status, if they cancel it, that sort of thing. So basically, flows on a public-facing community are drives this and controls all the logic. So I'm not going to go through all of this unless we want to later. But essentially, someone arrives on our community site, they enter their membership number, they validate, that they're a valid member. The system, the flow finds their record, gives back their parameters, so we know how far how they have an active membership and how many guests they can bring. And then the flow asks them for what date they'd like to visit and how many guests, and then it goes and it finds the available time slots that match their criteria, and then it asks them for a couple of other bits of information depending on which program they're entering under, and then it provides them with a reservation and confirmation number. So here's a small snapshot of the community. We'll see it for real in the demo, but we didn't know how long we were going to be using the system, and we needed to get it up quickly. So we just used the standard Salesforce template. You could go ahead and you could make it much more complex and look exactly like your website if you wanted to. But for our purposes, we wanted it to be simple. It was a new experience, new step for our members, and we wanted to make it simple. So they just click on their member area, and then they fill out the right information. As you can see, we have a couple of other different entry points as well. So again, here's the flow. They go to our homepage, aqua.org, and then that will give them all the COVID parameters, tell them what they need to do. They navigate over to the community page. Then they select their entry time. They make the reservation. They receive a confirmation number, and then on their phone or print it out, they can print their confirmation number, bring it. It's that way the guest services folks knows that they have a valid reservation. So what did we do on the platform to make these happen? I want to highlight a couple of the features so we can look for them when we get to the demo. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's a few automation types, heavily dependent on flows. I think there's 5 or 6 or 7 different flows that we use for this process. They're all screen flows. And here's a couple screenshots of them. We also use workflow to send out some basic emails and reminders. We give the confirmation email when they make it, but also we have a time-based workflow so that they'll get a reminder the day of their reservation to make sure that to make sure they have their confirmation number handy. And also we want to encourage folks to cancel if they're not going to make the reservation, so that it gives the availability back to other folks. We use some custom metadata because we weren't sure how far in advance we wanted to allow reservations. Again, it was totally brand new for members. We didn't know if we wanted to only do it 3 days a week, 10 days, all month. We wanted to be able to change that rapidly. So that's just one value stored in custom metadata that we can change, and it'll automatically propagate throughout all of the flows and change all of the reservation options. Custom permissions is something we put in because we have validation rules in place that prevent a time slot from being overbooked, right? We don't want someone to inadvertently, make a reservation when there is no availability. So on the internal side of the system, because we have a central reservations call center where people, if they have problems or if they don't have a computer or they don't want to do it on the computer, they can call and they can have our folks make the reservations for them. we wanted to have the validation rules in place that stop the time slots from being sort of oversold. But I was concerned, and it has happened a handful of times in the 8 or 9 months we've been running this, that we'd have two guests that would be trying to reserve the reservation at the same time for the same time slot. And they would both be starting the process, and they would have gotten past the point where the flow determines which time slots are available. So we, with custom permissions, we exempt them from the validation rule. And then the unique field attribute we put in workflow on some of the time slot stuff, that's just to make sure that me or an admin does not mess up and inadvertently create two time slots for the same day, or 2 days, and all of a sudden we have people making reservations against different records at the same time without us realizing it. So that just prevents us from in the config making it incorrect. As I mentioned, we use the unauthenticated community. So we will see a little bit how that works in the demo, but the community is there to host the screen flows, the various Lightning components, host the menu that we have, host the images, make it look a little nice, and it creates the public user. There's an option in the community to allow public to access certain things. So that means they don't have to log in at all. Talk about that. And then we use some Lightning pages to make for our folks internally, where we can embed the flows on a page. So our help, our central reservations unit over here can have access to all the flows on one page all the time. So no matter which type of guest is calling in, they can get the right information. They can see some charts. They can see some various things, and kind of very easily in their sort of console see everything they need. Okay, so we're gonna go over to the demo here. So here is kind of what the community looks like on the front side. Someone navigates from our website and they end up landing here on the members link, for example, and they come in and they put in their membership number. So that's on their membership cards. Everyone has that, and they know that, and they need to show that to gain entry anyway. So I've made up a membership number for our demo purposes here. So since this is public, right? So anyone could theoretically access any of it. We also put in the zip code so that you would have to know the person's zip code and not just kind of be guessing at membership numbers. And we have a couple of other sort of safeguards, guardrails in there if you want. So I'm going to enter the wrong zip code for a second, and you'll see it's unable to find the membership because that doesn't match. So it comes back to the same flow and says that wasn't right, and it tells you can call our number if you need to do that. If you're having problems, if there's an error, maybe there's a data error on our side, or maybe you just don't remember you've moved and changed zip code or something. But if you put in the correct zip code, it returns with some information. It tells us right here that what level our membership is, how many guests we're allowed to bring on that membership. It also tells us how far in advance you can make a reservation. So these elements are what's pulled in from the customer's account record. And then this is pulled in from the custom metadata. We're allowing reservations 10 days in advance right now. So that's going to automatically limit that. So we'll see here, if I were to come over and I were to choose, say, the 8th, which is past the deadline, and say 4 people, I'm going to get an error. So it's going to stop me from doing that there. What I want to do is choose today. And I want to choose 4 because I want to show you a couple of things here. So we'll see here, we get the time slots. So now I've confirmed that I want to come today, and I see the time slots. You'll notice that there is no noon time slot, for example, because there is no capacity for 4 people at noon. So in real time, it's taking a look at that. If I were to only do 2 people, for example, and go forward, we'll see that the noon time slot is available. So this is real time as people are making the reservations. It's serving up what the availability is for their program. I'm going to go ahead and choose a time. I will remind people again of our COVID safety procedures, and they can agree to those. Hit next. Here's another guardrail that we put in. So we're going to email the email that we have on file for this membership. So no matter what, the email that we have is going to receive an email when you make a reservation. And this here shows us a masked version of the email so that if you knew what it was, you would know that it was the right email. And if you didn't know what it was, it wouldn't be giving away anything. We also give the option to let you also enter a secondary email. This is in case the first email is out of date, or if it's a spouse or a child or someone else who's making the reservation and they need to get the confirmation number. You have the option to enter a second email so that you can get the confirmation number too. But we're always going to email the first one, the primary one. Again, it's a safety measure for us. So I don't need to enter another one here. And then we get our confirmation number. So what we have here is the confirmation number has been emailed, so they're going to have that in their box. Their inbox is going to look similar to this. It shows them the date and time of their reservation, the number of guests, the confirmation number, and invites them to cancel if they need to. This number, we designed it to look random because this is being recorded. I want to go through it all, but essentially it does in there tell our guest services folks the style of reservation, what program it was under, how many guests it was for, what day it was for, and what time it's for. So all that is sort of encoded in that confirmation number. So that way, when guests show up to enter, our folks don't have to be going into Salesforce to manage, to see if there's a reservation or any of that stuff. They can just trust that the system has validated all the things that it needs to validate and gives them a valid confirmation number. So through here, if you can click the cancel if you want. You can also go to the cancellations. What I want to show here is if we open another window, we go to the cancellations. This URL here with the embedded ID. This is the reservation ID of the record that was just created in Salesforce. If you click that in your email or off of the flow, it'll basically prompt you to just cancel it right there, and tells you right with a date that it was for, so you know that you want to cancel it. But if you just land on the cancellations tab instead of clicking through, you click on the cancellations tab here, or you somehow truncate some of the ID or anything like that, it's just going to take you to a same URL, but it's going to take you to a different flow, and it's going to ask you if you want to enter the confirmation number. That way, it'll basically look up your reservation, and you can cancel it and bring you to the same page. So all this is really doing is skipping that step, because we're passing through a URL parameter to get you there, and from there we could cancel the reservation if we wanted. And then it asks you if you want to make another reservation in place of it, and it starts the process over again by giving you the reservation information. All right, so now let's go quickly to the inside, and we can kind of see what we need to see here. So if I go over to reservations, I can see that reservation that we just made and it's now canceled. I can see all the information that I wanted to see about that. I can see here are the time slots that we have for today with our current capacities. Again, this is not real data. This is a sandbox, but it's showing the information that we have here. Well, I guess what I would highlight for you here is, because we are now past 10:30 Eastern time, the 10 o'clock time slot is no longer available. So part of what the flow looks at is, we don't want people to make reservations for dates or times that have already passed. So there's this checkbox here that is part of the search criteria, the query criteria in the flow, to make it so that they can go ahead and they can't make old reservations, essentially is what that's about. So that's looking at the time. So even though it's after 10:30, basically we allow the people to have a 10:30 reservation to enter between 10:30 and 11. So the 10:30 does not become inactive until 11 o'clock is active. So if someone were to show up right now and there was a 10:30 time slot, they could get in and make the reservation from their phone right while they were there. Let's see what else we have here. So here's sort of the custom metadata information. where we put in the number of days. We keep track of that. It's as simple as going into this field and just controlling that variable. I would control the number of days for we can make reservations. Here we can go through the flow. Again, I'm not necessarily going to walk through the entirety of the flow, but for those not familiar with it, this is the reservation flow that we just took a look at and made the reservation. The blue elements are the screen elements that the user would see. The pink elements are the database queries and edits and updates. And the orange elements are the decision points that the flow would make. So we basically ran through most of this flow. So, this is where you enter your information, your initial information here as far as what's your member number and your zip code. It goes ahead and it's where it looks and it finds the account. And that's where it circles back through. If it does not find your membership, it brings you back to the same page. And that's where it gives you this condition message that pops up, hasn't found the message. If it has found, it goes and asks you to put in the date. One of the things we didn't want to have people do is we don't want to have members make multiple reservations on the same day. So there's a check in there to make sure that they don't do that, and it'll give them a different screen, tell them they've already made a reservation if they have. Again, we want to encourage them to cancel if they're not going to make their scheduled reservation so that they can give back the allocation to other members. The time slot choice, and then the screens here to this is the data. This is where they enter the screen choice, email if they want it, and it makes the reservation and gives them the confirmation. On the cancellation flow, it's a little more involved because there's different programs it could be canceling from. This is also where it checks at first. The first thing it does is make a decision. Have we passed in the parameter so we have the reservation ID, or do we need to ask them for the confirmation number? So that's on the start element here. The very first element is the decision of which way do we go? Do we give this screen or we go down this path? Really what I wanted to show here that I thought was pretty cool that we came up with was because I know what kind of reservation you've made when you go to cancel, whether it was a corporate membership, a household membership, or some of our other programs, I don't need to ask you again if I ask you if you want to make another reservation to replace your canceled reservation. I don't need to ask you which reservation flow you want to go down. I can just capture that information coming in and then send you to a different flow. So these are all subflows essentially that at the end of the cancellation flow will bring you right back to the next registration flow again without asking you and having you click to another page. So we were happy we came up with that. So that's the demo. Let's talk about a couple of lessons learned though. First thing that's kind of scared me when we went to publish this was sometimes we open as early as 9 a.m. Excuse me. And what I learned is that you cannot make a time field the label for a record choice. So ultimately, this is what's called a record choice set. When it shows you the time slots, what it's really serving you is here are all the different time slot records that we have. So again, if we were to come back over to here and we were to see each of these records is kind of what we're showing you. It's going to hide the ones that don't have any availability or don't have the availability you need, but really it's showing you which of these time slot records you're going to choose. But you can't have a time element be the label for whatever reason. So what we figured out was we could make a time formula field, which converts the time slot time field into a text label. That works well. I mean, it's indistinguishable from the guest point of view reading it, but the problem potentially is that once you convert this to text instead of time, then it's sorted alphanumerically rather than chronologically, and that would put 10 a.m. before 9 a.m. because 1 comes before 9. It's reading from left to right. So fortunately, there is an option in the flows to be able to show label A here, times formula, but sort that by the actual time. So you can sort it by time, even though he's showing the text. I thought that was going to be a problem, but we ended up overcoming that fairly easily. And then again, Salesforce is constantly putting out a myriad of features, and Flow is probably leading the charge of all the features each year or each release. And one of the probably in the last year or so, very nice features was that when you do a Git Records and you so we're getting the account that has the membership, you don't have to specify. You no longer have to specify every field you want to return back to your flow. You can choose this option where automatically store all fields. Very handy, saves a lot of time. You don't have to go through creating all these variables. But what I learned is that the data validation that we have on this screen that prevents us from making a date too far past the date that we're limiting by, or the number of guests, if you don't specify them as variables independently, the validation does not respect it. So this syntax here, where I'm checking to make sure that the party size is less than or equal to the maximum number of visitors, that doesn't work if you do this store all fields. The syntax will be there, it just won't acknowledge it. So what we ended up doing is, between the Git Records and the screen, we did assign those variables that we needed specifically for that purpose. So it's a little redundant in that we're sort of getting the values twice, because we're doing it in the store all fields, but then we're also assigning it. But that's why in the syntax, we're comparing it to a variable, not to a field, because we are assigning it that way. So then finally, I guess the last thing to show is the education experiences. So based on the success that we had with the reservations, we realized when we got close to the fall that schools weren't going to open, or even if they did open, not all the school groups were going to come. I mean, during the school year, during the week, a lot of our visitors are school groups. So we put together an education experiences application that works very similarly. I'm not going to go through it as much. It is a lot more complex on the business side, because what you're eligible to register for depends on whether you're a public school, private school, homeschool, which county you're in, which state you're in, how many students you have in your class. I mean, there's a lot of different variables, and we offer multiple programs. So some of them are free, some of them cost money, some of them could be free if you meet certain criteria. So there's a lot more on the business side, but on the Salesforce side, it's exactly the same process. We're using a public community and the reason I think that we went with a public community was mostly for ease. People could just, if we made people create a username and password, that's just a lot of overhead. People are going to get themselves locked out, or they're going to lose it, or they're going to try to make multiple accounts. This isn't something like a community that we have built for, say, our area teachers, where they can log in and they can get into sensitive information and they can share information, they can collaborate. The public community, the unauthenticated community, was just because some people are just going to come to our site once and make one reservation and that's it. Some people are going to keep coming back. That's okay, but we didn't want to get into the whole overhead of all of the licenses and the logins. But so let me click over to the education experience. Where did I put that? Nope, I didn't make that here. No, I'm sorry, I'm on the community. So the education experience one is kind of right here. Not going to run through the whole thing unless somebody has questions they want to come back to. But a couple of different features that we did add to this. I want to know whether you're returning or not. I don't want you, if you've already made a virtual field trip for your class, or you have multiple classrooms, I don't want you to have to enter all of your information again. One, that's a customer service issue. Two, it's a data quality issue. So I want you to use the same record. So if you've not come to us before, you hit next. It's going to invite you to end. This is a check that we put in afterwards. It asks you to put in your email address to make sure that you're not already in our system, because even if you said you hadn't registered, maybe you had or you've forgotten. Well, so I'm already in there, so that's a bad example. So let me just make one that's not in there. So you can see it'll ask you for a bunch of information. It's kind of a not a long form, but a sizable form. Who you are, what school you're with, what the address is, what your jurisdiction is. If you're in Maryland, it then asks you for the county, because that matters. The type of school, for example. I've already created one, so if I have come back, if I have already registered at least once, I could click this, and then it opens up this field and allows me to enter an educator code that is sort of randomly assigned, so I can remember that code. And then when I enter that, it'll find me, and it'll say, let me, again, kind of masking it. It'll let me know who it is, so I know that I've got the right code. So if demo educator was the name of my name, and demo school was the name of my school, so you can see that there. And then from here, this is where I can say, for this registration, what grade am I registering for, what class, kind of thing. We'll do pre-K. We'll say we have 15 students. Similarly here, unlike reservations where people can make them essentially now for entry almost immediately if there's availability, because here we're coordinating field trips, virtual field trips, but still we have to line up an educator and make sure we have technology set up. We don't allow folks for right away, so we have a begin date and an end date for this purpose. So we can come in here and we can say I want to choose a date later in March. Two different styles of programs. Again, this form is all different. I already said that I was a Maryland school, so this Maryland Mountains to the Sea option is available to Maryland schools. It's not available to not Maryland schools, so you would get different options depending on your previous registration. But we'll say we'll do another program. Yes, we'll agree to do Zoom. Again, we're getting all the different time slots. So this isn't showing only time slots on one day. In fact, it says in here that it's going to give you the 7 days before and 7 days after, because we don't want to keep you sort of diving to guess if we have availability on whatever day. So it'll let you see the availability of the time slots that we have. You can choose whatever time slot you want, and then you can choose whatever program you want to be part of. We'll choose the Shark program. And then we got the registration. If we came to the inside and we click over to that app very quickly, we can hidden. We can see the registration that I just made has all that information. It's going to do the reminders. It's going to give everybody the updates that we needed to give. We have very similar app type pages on the inside. We can tell who's paid and who hasn't paid, who need to have a meeting URL set up. All the flows are here. It's the same basic idea. It's just a more complex user model, data model. Come back. I guess so. Now here's when we have time for questions. Hopefully we have some.
Okay. Yes, we have a lot. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Everybody's been saying how amazing this is. TJ says this session is 100% making it beyond worthwhile to wake up before the sun this morning.
Oh, wow.
So thank you so much. There are so Deborah mentioned there are some changes to permissions available to guest users in the Spring 21 release. I looked it up and it seems like guest users can no longer edit, delete, modify all, or view all permissions. Is that something that is going to affect your reservation or your flows?
I guess I'm not on you said on the Spring 21 release, so one that is not out yet. I guess
right.
we need to probably check through that. I know that there were a bunch of changes, yes, since the summertime when we started this till now. Salesforce changed the security model to allow different things. There's a new feature in Flow and Screen Flow where you can allow the flow to run in system mode. So basically the guest user themselves, they don't need permissions. It was a little counterintuitive to me when I first read it. I'm like, what? You want me to grant this flow the ability to do anything, to run as an admin? But once I realized what it was doing is I built into the flow what data elements and what fields are available. So that's how you get around the whole guest user security, is that the flow runs in system mode, so that it isn't actually the guest user that's making edits to the record.
Okay, cool. And then Eugene asks, does the aquarium use a separate membership management system, or is that all contained in Salesforce as well? If it's in Salesforce, what is the link between this and patron records?
Right. Okay. So we do use a box office management system that houses the memberships. That's the system of record for the memberships. So previous to the need for this application, we already had an integration set up between that system and Salesforce, so that every 5 minutes or whatever it is, it would bring in the relevant information, so we could use it for our marketing cloud and our philanthropy department and things like that. So we are bringing in, there's a child record of account called account membership that holds your membership information. So it's got the where you bought it from, what level you bought, the start and end date, and all that stuff. And then there's some roll-ups on the account that give you the most recent information. So you're on the account record itself, it has the current level and current expiration date. And again, that was already set up pre this project. So that's how it works for us. We didn't have to worry about that for this project.
So, and it kind of piggybacks on that, Sandy asked, how do member benefits affect the reservation flow behavior?
Okay, so really, we're only worried about two elements of the membership for the purposes of this reservations. It is your expiration date of your membership, so that we don't allow you to make a reservation past your expiration date. So in the flow, when it said you could make a reservation up through February 7th or 8th, whatever it was, if your membership expired January 31st, it would show you that January 31st was the last date you could make it. So there's like a conditional comparison in that data validation that does that. And then the other is the level of the membership, which has the maximum number of guests. There's actually a formula field that we created for this, because all we have is the label of what membership level you have. So I just made a formula statement that converts that to a number. So it's a case statement. So it has all the different levels of membership and all the different number of people. They're the only two benefits that we're managing as it relates to this application.
And then with this, can they log into their account to see membership limits or anything like that? No.
Again, to do that, we would need to make a username and password for each member. And I guess there's some licensing costs for that would have been a concern. We were closed when we were making this, so obviously we wanted to make this without spending very much money, and we were able to do it without spending any additional money. So we would need to do that to let them be able to do those kind of things. Or, theoretically, it was a lot of ways to do that. So no, the only thing they can do through this portal with the reservations is make a reservation and cancel the reservation. So basically, they make the reservation by filling out the form, so it's all brand new. They're not editing anything existing. It's all just creating the record from the flow, and then the cancellation is just finding that reservation, and then all they can do is cancel or not. So that's the only edit they could make to an existing record.
And then one of the big ones that a lot of people were like, ditto, ditto. Can Michael talk about steps to create the unauthenticated communities and confirm that no community licenses are needed? I feel like that's been confirmed in the chat.
Sure.
But,
okay, sure. It's actually very simple. So let me go back to the last question for 1 second. So we do have on the box office system through our website where folks can log in to their membership and buy a new membership and extend their membership and read some of their membership benefits. But that's happening in the other system. It's not in Salesforce at all, and it's not connected to this community. So yeah, let me share my screen back then, I guess. So on the I'll find the screen very easily here. Hopefully, I did the community. No. I'm trying to show. So it's right here. There's a setting. It's quicker for me to show it on this slide than it is to go into the community. There is a setting in the setup of your community where you literally click public can access this community, and by doing that, it allows more than the login page to then be available without logging in. If you don't have that checked, I'm pretty sure if you go to the community, any of the URL, it'll automatically route you to the login page. In this case, it won't. You still then have to decide. For example, you'll notice this is an internal shot of the community where I have like 6 options. We didn't want people to actually just find all of them. We wanted some people to only get there if they knew the URL. So on the actual community side, you can see that I don't have all of those things. I only have some of them showing. And that's because I've only made it so that only some of the menu options are available to the public visibly, and some of them aren't. And then other pages, we make it so that you can get to if you know the URL, but you can't navigate to if you don't. So, I mean, making it for the public is really simple. You just have to turn that on. That creates a guest user and a guest user profile for that community. You can find it through the users. It's usually easier to just go through the community because you can click like right here, little slide thing covered up there. But right here, you can click Reservations Profile, and that takes you to the profile. To give the right permissions to the public. But that's back to the first question. I try to build the community before they put in the more restrictions for the guest user. So now you don't really need that as much anyway because you run the flows in system mode. So the flow can do what it can do, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you so much. I need to check and see if there were any other questions since we started the Q&A.
Okay.
I don't see any.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that they're not there. If you want to ask your question, the last one is from TJ. Okay. Lots of people aren't going to know where the guest user permissions are set. Can you have him talk? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I can show that real quick if we have the time. So let me go back to sharing the screen. If we're in here and we go into the community, into the communities. I'm sure on the click of the wrong space. So this is the reservations. So if we go into the builder, so this is what allows us to put the flows and the images and the menus and the layouts that we want on each page. Inside of the settings here, that's where you turn it on. You can turn it on, turn it off. It's turned off by default. By having it turned on and saved, that goes ahead and it creates this reservations profile. Reservations, because that's the name of the community. So I called the community when I set it up, just called Reservations. And really, I think it's technically a little bit different than every other profile, but basically it looks like the profiles that you're used to, and you can give access to whatever objects you want to give access to. I think here we probably, we have a few. So we give read to time slots. I give read and create to reservations, read to the dates. That's basically it. And then there's individual fields. Again, I think that was set up. You don't really need to do that anymore, I don't think, because if you, in the flow, let me go to one of these flows that I had open here. When you go to save as the flow, if you go into advanced, this is when you can choose to run the flow in user context or system context with or without sharing. So if you go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, we have another question about users, but go ahead and continue, and then I'll ask that.
Okay. Well, I think this is the least restrictive, the most wide open is to a system context without sharing. That basically just means the flow runs in mode, which again, it scared me at first, but when you think about it, it's limited to what the flow is. So as long as you're not exposing information in the flow that you don't want the user to have access to, there's no way they can have access to it. And by setting it in running it in that mode, it takes away any of those standard user permission problems.
And then we have a question in terms of guest users. Is there a volume of users for the site overall? Is there a limit?
There is. It's like everything in Salesforce. There's limits. I don't remember what they are offhand, but they were really high. I mean, they run into like the hundreds of thousands and millions, per whatever period. So I'm sure it depends on your edition and the number of licenses you have and that sort of stuff. I don't remember what they are offhand, but I remember when I looked, we were eons away from hitting any of those limits. And of course, just like everything, you can buy higher limits pretty much if you need it. We've had, I think, about 30,000, 25 or 30,000 reservations through the system. I mean, in the grand scheme of Salesforce, that's nothing. Hundreds of thousands and millions in a day.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Sure. Anything else?
So somebody is saying how are payments being managed?
Okay, so for all of the programs that we put on for reservations, there is no payment because the general admission tickets are sold through the box office system the way they always have been. All these reservations are essentially free in that you would have already purchased a membership or you would have already earned through a corporate membership or a Read to Reef program or something else. You would already have a voucher or something, a membership card or something, so you don't have to have any payments. Oh, for the education side, I think it says, yeah, I skipped over that. So we didn't really have the time. Most of our education experience guests are not paying anything. They're Maryland schools, Baltimore City schools. Often they're covered by various grants. So the schools themselves aren't paying anything. There's, the out-of-state folks, some of the homeschool folks, some of the special programs do have a payment. It was too small of a percentage of the number of registrations that we would have to worry about building that into the system. So basically, we just email them an invoice. Salesforce does that, and then they can contact the central reservations unit and pay over the phone. It's not the most elegant solution at all, for sure, but considering that it was only like 1 or 2% of all of our registrations that have any payment, it just wasn't worth building into the system, particularly under the time frames that we had, time restraints.
Okay, awesome. Do you have any examples where this ran against a bulk list of reservations?
I'm not sure what you mean.
I'm not sure, Sean, what you mean. I'll see if he types something else.
Okay.
Maybe is there a conflict? if are you ever loading a list of reservations, or is it all one-to-one?
No, yeah, no, all the reservations are being created either by the guest or by a central reservation unit. The only thing that's bulk loaded are the time slots and the capacities. So that's one of the reasons why we're only allowing reservations up to 10 days in advance. It's because we're constantly, way more than we would have ever done in a regular year. We're constantly rejiggering the times that we're going to be open and the capacity limits, depending on what tells us. So like every 2 weeks or so, we're loading in time slot records and capacities, but we're not loading any reservations.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for your excellent questions.
Thank you, guys. You guys can find me on LinkedIn or in the Trailblazer community. I'll be happy to connect if you have any questions. Follow up as you need.
I want to jump in and just say thank you, Michael, and thank you to everyone for attending. It was a very engaging session, clearly, so great work. Up next on the agenda is challenges for solo admins and how to overcome them over on stage B. So feel free to make your way there, and don't forget to stop by the resources to say hello to Form Assembly and all the sponsors. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Haley and Sarah. Have a good day.